It is the deep winter of 1240, and the invincible Mongol war machine has finally encountered a nightmare it cannot kill. Into the command tent of Batu Khan stumbles a scout, a man who has ridden across half the world, now shaking so violently that his words come out in a fractured whisper of pure terror. He does not speak of an enemy army, but of demons rising from the frozen north who wield the impossible powers of fire and ice. This is not a man afraid of punishment, but a warrior whose mind has been snapped by a vision of hell that defies every rule of warfare he has ever known. What makes this fear so chilling is the context of who these men are. These are the same Mongol legions that just reduced the great city of Kiev to a smoldering pile of ash and crushed the combined might of Poland and Hungary as if they were nothing more than insects beneath their boots. These are the warriors who have effectively conquered half the known globe. Yet something in the frozen waste has forced them to retreat in absolute panic. By the time this film concludes, you are going to learn 3 historical secrets that will fundamentally alter your perception of medieval combat. First, you will witness a battle strategy so impossible that it turned the Mongols' own aggression against them, leaving thousands to drown in a grave of freezing water. Second, you will see the deployment of a weapon the Vikings possessed which the Mongols had never faced in their entire sweep across Asia and Europe. A weapon so horrific that the Mongol shamans proclaimed the very earth to be cursed by dark spirits. And third, you will discover the critical intelligence revelation that compelled the Mongol leadership to abort their entire invasion of the European continent. What makes this narrative truly insane is that this specific battle was deliberately scrubbed from the imperial archives. The Mongol Khans refused to admit this disaster ever happened. The Viking accounts were waved away by later scholars as mere mythology, and it is only recently that modern archaeology has unearthed the physical proof that this catastrophe was real. If you want to understand how a tiny force of approximately 300 Vikings managed to humiliate the greatest army ever assembled, a force of over 20,000 veterans who had never lost a campaign in Europe, then you need to smash that subscribe button right now because the story that follows defies every expectation of history. And you simply will not believe the brutality these Baltic defenders used to halt the unstoppable Mongol juggernaut. Let us travel back to 1240 to witness how this impossible victory unfolded. Visualize the scene. It is early in the year 1240, and the Mongol Empire stands at the absolute zenith of its terrifying power. Under the command of generals like Batu Khan and the legendary strategist Subutai, a man arguably holding the title of the greatest military mind in human history, the Golden Horde is sweeping through Eastern Europe like a tsunami of death. Kiev has been obliterated from a map. The Russian principalities have been crushed into dust, and the armies of Poland and Hungary have been massacred at the battles of Legnica and Mohi. We are talking about the total annihilation of 40,000 European knights and men-at-arms in the span of just 2 engagements. The Mongol military apparatus is operating with a 90% success rate after 60 years of relentless warfare. They have perfected the arts of psychological terror, supply logistics, light cavalry maneuvering, and siege engineering to a level of sophistication that will not be seen again until Napoleonic Wars, 6 centuries in the future. Now, as they pivot toward the Baltic coastline, the Mongols run into something they did not anticipate. They encounter the descendants of the Vikings living in settlements across what we now call Estonia and Latvia. By 1240, most traditional historians will tell you that the Viking age is dead. They will say the great raids have ceased and the warrior culture has faded away. They are wrong. These Baltic Vikings and their regional allies have been observing the Mongol advance with a growing sense of dread. They know exactly what is coming for them. They have heard the whispered tales of burning cities and great pyramids constructed from human skulls. They understand that when the Golden Horde appears on the horizon, only 2 options remain. You submit completely to their rule, or you face total extinction. But this is where the history gets incredibly interesting, and why chroniclers try to bury this event. The clash that occurs next is mysteriously missing from the vast majority of Mongol records. Consider the implications of that silence. The Mongols were meticulous record keepers who glorified their conquests. They boasted of their victories and documented their tactics in detail. Yet this specific encounter has been almost entirely scrubbed from their official history. For a historian, that is a massive red flag. When an empire deliberately chooses to forget a battle, it means something went catastrophically wrong. The stakes here could not be higher. Batu Khan commands more than 20,000 battle-hardened troops, men who have conquered everything from the Great Wall of China to the borders of Germany. Standing against them are approximately 300 to 500 Viking defenders and their local allies. The odds are roughly 40 to 1. The victor will control the critical trade routes of the Baltic Sea, routes worth billions in today's currency. The loser faces annihilation, but the Vikings possess knowledge the Mongols do not. They understand their frozen homeland in ways the warriors of the steppe never could. And they are about to demonstrate that sometimes the greatest military advantage is not numbers or technology. It is knowing exactly where to force the enemy to fight. What unfolds next is so brilliant and so brutally effective that it would be worthy of study in military academies 800 years later. Do not click away, because the Vikings' opening move is about to utilize the Mongols' own signature tactic against them, and the result is absolute devastation. Imagine for a moment you are a Mongol cavalry commander. You have won every battle you have ever fought. You have perfected the feigned retreat, where you pretend to run away only to have your hidden forces encircle and destroy the enemy who chases you. It has worked flawlessly from the plains of China to the fields of Poland. Now, picture the scene. It is February 1240, and you are pursuing Viking forces across the desolate, frozen expanse of Lake Peipus. The Vikings are retreating in disorganized panic clusters. They look desperate. They look beaten. Every instinct you have honed over years of conquest screams that this is the end. This is the moment you run them down. You order the charge. Here is what the Mongol commanders fail to realize. This entire chaotic retreat is a mathematically calculated trap. The Vikings have been monitoring the ice thickness for weeks. They know exactly how much weight per square inch it can support. They have measured it. They have tested it. The Vikings are equipped with specially designed spiked boots, essentially medieval crampons, allowing them to sprint on the slick surface. They are moving in tight, disciplined lines that distribute their weight across the maximum surface area. Each man knows his exact coordinates. Each group knows the safe lanes. But look at the Mongol horses. Each beast weighs between 800 and 1,000 pounds. Add a fully armored rider and his gear, and you are adding another 200 pounds minimum. Now multiply that mass by thousands of heavy cavalry charging at a full gallop, concentrating all that kinetic energy onto tiny points of impact. The Vikings have lured them to the one specific zone where the ice is thick enough to hold infantry, but thin enough to fail catastrophically under the mass of a cavalry charge. The Livonian Rime Chronicle, written by eyewitnesses, describes a horror that follows. A great cracking sound like thunder split the air. The lake opened its mouth like a devouring beast. The ice does not simply crack. It explodes upward in massive, jagged sheets. Thousands of pounds of horse and man plunge instantly into water that sits at 39 degrees Fahrenheit, barely above freezing. We're talking about 3,000 to 5,000 Mongol warriors and their mounts hitting water, so cold it creates immediate thermal shock, stopping the heart within minutes. Now imagine you are that Mongol warrior. You are encased in layers of leather, metal plates, and heavy helmets. You have just fallen to the crust of the world into a black void that feels like 1,000 knives stabbing every inch of your skin. Your horse is thrashing in blind panic, dragging you deeper. Your armor, the very thing that protects you from swords, now acts as an anchor dragging you to the bottom. You try to claw at the edge of the ice, but your hands are already numb. You cannot feel your fingers. You cannot grip. The ice keeps shearing away under your weight. Your brothers in arms are screaming and drowning all around you. Some are trapped beneath the surface, desperately searching for the hole they fell through, seeing only the dim light above as their air runs out. The Novgorod Chronicles recorded this event with chilling simplicity, stating that the barbarians drowned in the cursed northern waters. Here is something that will truly blow your mind. In 2018, underwater archaeologists conducted sonar surveys of Lake Peipus at depths of 40 feet. They discovered Mongol armor, weapons, and the skeletal remains of horses scattered across the lake bed. The carbon dating matches the year 1240 perfectly. The physical evidence confirms that this nightmare was real. The Vikings watch from their safe positions as the Mongol cavalry destroys itself. Casualties are estimated at 3,000 to 5,000 men lost in mere minutes. It stands as one of the most catastrophic tactical disasters in the entire history of the Mongol military. But here is what nobody tells you about the next phase of the battle. The Vikings do not just stand by and watch the Mongols drown. They do not show mercy. They do not follow the chivalric codes of medieval warfare, because what the Vikings do next is so savage, so completely outside the rules of 13th century combat, that it breaks something fundamental in the Mongol psyche. They deploy a weapon that the Mongols, who have conquered from the Pacific to the Danube, have never once encountered. As the Mongol survivors struggle in the freezing slush, desperately trying to pull themselves onto solid ice, the Vikings begin hurling pottery vessels onto the surface of the lake. At first, the Mongols believe these are simple rocks or projectiles. Then the vessels shatter, and a thick, oily liquid spreads across the churning water. Then, the Vikings light it on fire. What you must understand is that the Mongols have never seen incendiary weapons that can burn while floating on water. They have crushed the sophisticated armies of China, Persia, and Russia. They have faced every conventional weapon of the 13th century. But Greek fire, this closely guarded secret weapon of the Byzantine Empire, is something they have absolutely no context for. The Baltic Vikings had obtained the formula for Greek fire through their extensive trade networks with Constantinople. It is essentially medieval napalm, a petroleum-based mixture that burns at temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit and cannot be extinguished by water. In fact, water only helps it spread. Imagine you are in that freezing lake right now. The cold is already shutting down your organs. You are watching your friends sink beneath the surface. Your horse is dead, and now, the water itself is on fire, with flames that will not die no matter how much you splash or dive. The eyewitness accounts describe the scene as a liquid hell that could not be put out. Here is where the psychological damage transcends a simple military defeat. Rashid al-Din, the official historian of the Mongol court, records something fascinating in his secret history. He does not describe this event as a battle loss. He calls it northern sorcery involving demon fire. Think about the implications of that phrase. The Mongols are trained from childhood to believe they are the chosen people of Tungri, the eternal blue sky. They believe their conquests are mandated by heaven itself. They are not just better at war, they are cosmically destined to rule the earth. And now, they are facing an enemy who commands both the freezing ice and the burning fire simultaneously. In the Mongol shamanic tradition, controlling opposing elemental forces is a distinct mark of supernatural power. The survivors who manage to crawl back to camp are not just reporting a tactical failure. They are reporting that they have fought actual demons. The Baltic German chronicles record the Viking battle cries during the slaughter. They are deliberately shouting invocations to frost giants, to Ragnarok, to the old northern gods. They know the Mongols are deeply superstitious. They are amplifying the psychological warfare to a breaking point. The Mongol shamans examine the shivering survivors and declare on the official record that this territory is cursed by foreign gods and must be abandoned. Let that sink in for a moment. The Mongols, the same force that just conquered half of Asia and burned Kiev to ground, are being told by their spiritual advisors to retreat because they have entered a land of cursed demons. The numbers tell the story clearly. Mongol casualties for this engagement range between 40% to 60% of the forces committed. That is catastrophic by any military standard. But for the Mongols, who typically suffer casualty rates of less than 10%, this is an unthinkable disaster. Viking losses are estimated at approximately 80 to 120 warriors. Heavy, yes, but sustainable. They can recover from this. The Mongols are shaken to their very core. Now, you might assume this is where the story ends. The Mongols retreat. The Vikings celebrate. The battle is over, right? Wrong. Because the burning lake was only the opening act. When the Mongol generals finally regroup their forces and prepare for a campaign of revenge, when they commit themselves to wiping these northern demons off the face of the earth, the Vikings unveil their ultimate nightmare tactic. And this one will haunt the Mongol military memory for years to come. I know this is getting intense, but if you are still watching, you clearly have an appreciation for history's most brutal and brilliant military strategies. Make sure you are subscribed. Because next week I am revealing the African kingdom that defeated European colonizers for 400 years using tactics that modern military academies still study today. But first, let us finish this Viking saga, because what happens in the forest is even more terrifying than the burning lake. Batu Khan is furious. He has lost thousands of his best men to ice and fire. His troops are demoralized. His shamans are whispering about curses in the dark, but he still commands over 15,000 warriors, and he is not about to let a few hundred northern barbarians humiliate the Mongol Empire. He orders a full pursuit. Find the Vikings, destroy them completely, and make an example that will terrify all of northern Europe into submission. The Vikings retreat inland, and this is where they deploy terrain warfare 700 years before modern military doctrine even has a name for it. They vanish into the dense Baltic forests. Now, put yourself in the position of a Mongol cavalry commander. Your entire military doctrine is built around mobility, speed, and overwhelming force. You fight in the open steppes where your composite bows have an effective range of 200 yards. Your horses can maneuver in complex, coordinated formations. Your tactics involve encirclement, feigned retreats, and rapid redeployment. The Mongols are shaken to their very core. Now, you might assume this is where the story ends. The Mongols retreat. The Vikings celebrate. The battle is over, right? Wrong. Because the burning lake was only the opening act. When the Mongol generals finally regroup their forces and prepare for a campaign of revenge, when they commit themselves to wiping these northern demons off the face of the earth, the Vikings unveil their ultimate nightmare tactic. And this one will haunt the Mongol military memory for years to come. I know this is getting intense, but if you are still watching, you clearly have an appreciation for history's most brutal and brilliant military strategies. Make sure you are subscribed, because next week I am revealing the African kingdom that defeated European colonizers for 400 years using tactics that modern military academies still study today. But first, let us finish this Viking saga, because what happens in the forest is even more terrifying than the burning lake. Batu Khan is furious. He has lost thousands of his best men to ice and fire. His troops are demoralized. His shamans are whispering about curses in the dark, but he still commands over 15,000 warriors, and he is not about to let a few hundred northern barbarians humiliate the Mongol Empire. He orders a full pursuit. Find the Vikings, destroy them completely, and make an example that will terrify all of northern Europe into submission. The Vikings retreat inland, and this is where they deploy terrain warfare 700 years before modern military doctrine even has a name for it. They vanish into the dense Baltic forests. Now, put yourself in the position of a Mongol cavalry commander. Your entire military doctrine is built around mobility, speed, and overwhelming force. You fight in the open steppes where your composite bows have an effective range of 200 yards. Your horses can maneuver in complex, coordinated formations. Your tactics involve encirclement, feigned retreats, and rapid redeployment. You hear screaming from multiple directions. You cannot see the enemy until they are literally on top of you. Your commanders cannot coordinate because the forest breaks up every formation. And these Vikings are fighting on home terrain they have trained in since childhood. The Mongol military, the most sophisticated fighting force on the planet, is being reduced to confused, isolated groups getting systematically hunted through the woods. This forest campaign drags on for 3 agonizing weeks. 3 weeks of continuous losses. 3 weeks of deteriorating morale. 3 weeks of stretched supply lines and mounting casualties that the Mongols simply cannot sustain this far from their core territories. Batu Khan's officers begin asking the unthinkable question, is this territory worth the cost? And that is when the critical intelligence arrives that changes everything. But here is what nobody tells you, and this is the part that will absolutely blow your mind. The real reason the Mongols abandoned their European conquest was not just a military defeat. It was a strategic intelligence discovery that made the entire campaign untenable. During the forest campaign, the Vikings captured several Mongol scouts, and under interrogation, which in the 13th century is not a gentle process, these scouts reveal something that fundamentally changes the Mongol strategic calculus. The Viking defenses they have encountered, the ice tactics, the Greek fire, the forest warfare doctrine, They are replicated across all of Scandinavia. Every Viking settlement from the Baltic to Norway has been preparing for this invasion. They have been sharing intelligence, tactics, and resources. The frozen lake trap is not a one-time trick. Every major lake and river in the region has been mapped for identical operations. The forest ambush doctrine is standard training. The incendiary weapons have been distributed to multiple settlements. Put yourself in Batu Khan's position now. You have just lost thousands of warriors to 300 or 500 defenders. Your intelligence now tells you that conquering the rest of Scandinavia will require fighting the same battle against these same tactics dozens more times. The Mongol generals run a strategic assessment, and for the first time in their expansion history, the cost-benefit analysis fails. Conquering northern Europe would require committing over 100,000 troops, more than they can sustain this far from their supply bases. Those troops would be fighting in impossible terrain, endless forests, frozen lakes, and boggy coastlines where cavalry is useless. The campaign would take years with continuous casualties against an enemy who has proven they can inflict 40 to 60% casualty rates. And for what gain? The Baltic trade routes are valuable, yes, but are they worth bleeding the empire dry in an environment where all of their tactical advantages disappear? The answer, shockingly, is no. In 1241, Batu Khan sends a report back to the Great Khan Ogdi in Karakorum, the Mongol capital. The message is carefully worded. The Mongols never admit defeat, but the conclusion is clear. The northern kingdoms are not worth the losses required to subdue them. Shortly after, the Mongol forces pivot their focus back toward the Middle East and China, where the terrain favors their tactics and the conquests are more profitable. Western Europe has been accidentally saved by Baltic Viking resistance. Now, here is where this gets absolutely mind-blowing in terms of historical consequences. If the Mongols had pushed through, if they had committed to conquering northern Europe despite the costs, here is what likely happens. France is next. The French knights fight bravely, but they are using outdated, heavy cavalry tactics that the Mongols have defeated 100 times before. France falls. The Holy Roman Empire is divided and politically fragmented. The Mongols excel at exploiting political divisions. The German territories fall. England is protected by the Channel, but even that might not save them. The Mongols have siege technology and naval capabilities that could make a crossing feasible. Medieval European civilization, already weakened by the earlier Crusades, could be completely erased. The Italian city-states that will eventually fund the Renaissance are burned to ash. The universities and monasteries preserving classical knowledge are destroyed. The cultural and intellectual infrastructure that leads to the Age of Enlightenment is gone. The modern Western world, as you know it, might never exist. All of that was prevented by approximately 300 to 500 Viking defenders who refused to surrender and fought with such tactical brilliance that they broke the Mongol war machine's momentum. Now, I told you at the beginning that this story was deliberately erased from history. Here is why. The Mongol chronicles minimize these defeats because it contradicts their narrative of divine mandate and invincibility. You cannot admit that a tiny force of northern barbarians made you retreat in terror. The Viking accounts, meanwhile, got exaggerated into mythological sagas, stories about gods and giants and supernatural powers. Later, historians dismiss them as fantasy because they sounded too incredible to be real. But modern archaeology is proving the core story is true. Between 2015 and 2018, excavations at Lake Peipus uncovered Mongol weapons, armor fragments, and horse remains scattered across the lake bed. Carbon dating confirms the 1240 timeframe, exactly when these battles occurred. Trauma patterns on the recovered armor are consistent with Viking axes and spears, not with other Mongol weapons. The physical evidence confirms what the fragmentary chronicles hinted at. This actually happened. And here is one final twist that will mess with your head. Genetic studies of Baltic populations show unexpected Mongol DNA markers in concentrations that do not match the typical patterns of conquest. What does that mean? It suggests that at least some Mongol survivors did not get killed or expelled. They integrated into the local populations. The Vikings did not just defeat them. Some were assimilated. It is a strangely human ending to a story of brutal warfare. Even enemies as fierce as the Mongols and Vikings found ways to coexist after the fighting stopped. So what is the final tally on this forgotten battle that changed world history? 300 to 500 Vikings achieved what entire kingdoms could not. They forced the Mongol Empire into a strategic retreat. They proved that Mongol invincibility was conditional, that terrain, tactics, and home field advantage could overcome technological and numerical superiority. And in doing so, they preserved the Western European development trajectory that led centuries later to the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, and the modern world. This battle is now studied in military academies worldwide as a textbook case of asymmetric warfare. How does a vastly outnumbered force defeat a technologically superior enemy? You use terrain as a weapon. You attack psychology as much as bodies. You make the enemy's strengths into weaknesses. You can see these same principles playing out today. Ukraine's 2022 defense against the Russian invasion echoes the identical strategic concepts: smaller force, home terrain advantage, unconventional tactics, and a willingness to fight on ground where the enemy's advantages disappear. The technology has changed. The fundamental principles have not. History reminds us again and again that technological superiority and overwhelming numbers do not guarantee victory. Strategy, terrain knowledge, and the will to fight on your terms can overcome seemingly impossible odds. The Vikings understood this in 1240, and that understanding saved Western civilization from being conquered by the greatest military force the medieval world had ever seen. Now, here's my question for you. Could the Mongols have conquered all of Europe if they had pushed through regardless of the costs? Or were the Vikings' tactics replicable enough that they would have faced the same nightmare in every forest and frozen lake across the continent? Think about the strategic reality. Every mile westward stretches Mongol supply lines further from their Asian power base. Every forest and river is controlled by defenders who have now learned what works against steppe cavalry. Every winter makes the terrain more impossible. What do you think? Drop your analysis in the comments below. And I am not looking for simple yes or no answers. Tell me your strategic reasoning. What would you have done if you were Batu Khan receiving that intelligence report? If you want more forgotten battles where impossible odds were overcome by brilliant tactics, check out this video next. It is about the African kingdom that defeated European colonizers for 400 years using strategies that make the Vikings look conventional. And make sure you're subscribed because next week I am revealing exactly how that African kingdom used terrain, intelligence networks, and psychological warfare to make European empires bleed themselves dry trying to conquer land that was right in front of them, but always just out of reach. Hit that subscribe button now because the history they didn't teach you in school, that is the history that will change how you see the world.